The brain is a remarkably powerful place, the central organ of the human nervous system. It's made up of 100,000 miles of blood vessels. That's almost 4 times larger than the distance around the equator. Neurons transmit and receive information that tells us when to breathe, when something is painful, warns us when there is danger, and tells us when to cheer for the touchdown. Within the brain, there are 100 billion neurons who pass information as fast as 250 miles per hour. That could outpace a Formula One race car. The power of the brain is remarkable. But what if our brains have adopted a mindset that needs an upgrade? Are we in danger of being trapped in our mindsets? How do we stop these mindsets from becoming mind traps?
Even though no one likes feeling trapped, we all know what it feels like to be trapped, and we resist it. But what about when we're caught in a mind trap? How do we know when we're stuck in a mindset that is not what's best for us, that has actually trapped us? We're talking about how to know when a mindset has become a mind trap. And more importantly, what do we do about it? We're looking at 4 common mind traps that all of us have experienced at one time in one form or another. And in this session, we're going to talk about the negativity mind trap. Let me say from the start, I'm not talking about people who seem to view life as the glass is half empty versus people that are glass is half full kind of people. People who generally see life through a positive lens, even they can get caught up in the trap of negativity. But just to get started, let me give you a few scenarios. Let's say you're getting your yearly physical and the doctor walks in. What kind of news are you expecting? Do you think that she's going to tell me that I'm going to live to be 100? That she's never seen anyone so healthy? Or is she going to say something like this? Well, I hate to tell you, but this is it. We're at the end. I think this may be your last day alive. Or how about this? Let's say your boss sends you a text message and says, can you come by my office? Do you think, number one, that he's about to give me a raise? Or do you think, well, I think this is my last day because it seems I'm getting fired? No matter if you consider yourself an optimist or a realist, as my wife would say, all of us at one point or another, we all know what it feels like to get caught in the negativity trap. I want to introduce you to a guy named Paul. And if you've done any studying of the Bible, you've heard of him. Maybe you even know him as the Apostle Paul. And if you're not a Jesus follower, if faith is not your thing, I still think that there's something to learn from this guy. In fact, I think his story is quite fascinating because he was once a persecutor of Christians. Yeah, he had been party to the killing of those who were followers of Jesus. He himself had an encounter with Jesus that changed everything. I mean, he did a complete 180. Instead of persecuting Christians, he went to becoming someone who was one of the most influential, most impactful men or women who helped spread the message of Christianity to other cities, to other communities. I mean, how incredible is that for a person to go from someone who was killing followers of Jesus to then becoming a follower of Jesus to the point where he was risking his own life to share the hope, to share the excitement, the opportunity, the message of Jesus with others. Paul wrote these letters. He wrote multiple letters to followers of Jesus in just about every city he seemed to visit. One of those cities was Philippi. He wrote a letter to the church there that we know as the book of, or the letter of Philippians, which is in the New Testament. Philippians is a beautiful letter, but what's interesting to me is, maybe what's helpful for me is that Paul doesn't just say, don't be negative. No, he replaces it with something that's actually better. It's more meaningful than just optimism. It's actually more powerful than just positivity. Because this is not just an easy problem that we're facing. No, this is a genuine trap. And if we're going to escape the trap of negativity, it's worth looking at what kept Paul so positive. He introduces us not to a new word, but to a word that we don't necessarily associate with negativity. Paul says that if you want to get past your negativity, if you want to avoid the trap of negativity, you've got to choose joy. When I say the words choose joy, I don't know what your reaction is. I mean, maybe you have a mild irritation to it. Maybe it makes you angry. Maybe you even think, how am I supposed to be happy when I just lost my job? And if so, I get it. I totally get it. But here's the thing. Could it be that we're confusing joy with happiness? Because those are two very different words. None of us live in a perpetual state of happiness. I mean, it's too unrealistic to even think about being happy all the time. Happiness it's totally contingent on our circumstances and how we view our life. And we've all lived enough life to know that despite what Pharrell says, you just can't be happy all the time. No, joy it's so different. Joy is a deep contentment that we experience despite our circumstances. As followers of Jesus, joy allows us to see God's goodness despite how life is going in the moment. And Paul gives us a picture of what that actually looks like. He doesn't say, choose joy when things are going great. He says that it's possible to experience joy no matter your circumstances. He actually has instructions for how we can begin to experience it ourselves. But before we get into what he says, I think it's helpful to understand the context in which he wrote. When Paul wrote the letter of Philippians, he wasn't exactly at an all-inclusive resort. No, he was actually in jail. He was in a Roman prison. Scholars believe this letter was written around 62 AD, and as Paul writes these words in this letter, he's sitting in a dingy, foul-smelling, cold Roman jail. And that makes what he says even more powerful when we understand that he was choosing joy in some of his worst circumstances of his life. Here's what he says in the first chapter of Philippians. He says, brothers and sisters, here's what I want you to know. What has happened to me has actually helped to spread the good news. One thing has become clear. I am being held by chains because I am a witness for Christ. All the palace guards and everyone else, they know it. And because I'm a prisoner, most of the believers have become bolder in the Lord. They now dare even more to preach the good news without fear. Let me point out a few things. First of all, he calls them brothers and sisters because he considers them in the family of God. He says that there's something good that's happening as I sit here in this jail cell. He says that there's good that is coming from his bad situation, that it's become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that he is in chains for Christ. Did you see it? There it is. He's saying that the word is spreading about Jesus, and because of his chains, his brothers and sisters have now become even more confident in their faith. They've begun to share the good news about Jesus without any fear. Not because they don't have anything to be afraid of. No, they actually have something to be afraid of. But listen, I'm in prison. Paul's going, look at me. I'm here in prison. I get it. I know what's at stake. I know how dangerous this really is. This is not what I would have drawn up for my life either, but my confidence that God is with me, that God, whether in this life or the next, is going to deliver me, that God hasn't left me, that the confidence that I have, the hope that I have, the joy that I have, it's actually given everyone around me a similar kind of confidence. It's given them confidence, and it's given them an amount of courage that that they've never experienced before, where they don't have to be afraid of the things that most people are afraid of. And all of this has happened because of my circumstances. In his short little letter to them, we see at least 16 different places where Paul talks about the joy that he has. Paul is saying, yeah, I'm in prison. Yes, I'm chained, maybe even to a Roman prison guard. But I'm just telling you, I am still choosing joy even in the middle of the circumstances. I have joy for you. I have joy for what God has done. I have joy for what God is going to do. I have joy for who God is. I'm convinced that after reading the entire letter of Philippians, that choosing joy, it begins with the thoughts in our mind. See, at the very end of this letter, Paul gives us some instruction that is crucial in helping us escape the trap of negativity. He says we have to set our minds on something that will lead to freedom, not captivity. Listen to what he says. This is in chapter 4, in verse 8. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Paul chooses to use the verb think about, which means to dwell on. It's an active state of consideration. He's saying, don't just think about it once and then drive past it. No, like a roundabout in your mind. Like just go around and around and around. Look, Big Ben, Parliament. Look, Big Ben, Parliament, Big Ben, Parliament. Around and around and around. Paul starts with telling us to think about, to consider whatever is true, not whatever's false. Now, it's so easy for us to think about things that aren't even true. He says, think about whatever is noble. Have you ever heard of someone who makes a noble gesture to someone? When we use that word, it speaks to generosity, being considerate, to someone who's big-hearted, not whatever is ungenerous or something that lacks consideration of others or even ourselves. Whatever is right, not whatever's wrong. He says whatever's pure, not whatever's dirty, whatever is lovely, not the speech that's ugly. Whatever is admirable, not what's disreputable. Whatever is excellent, and not anything inferior to that. Whatever's praiseworthy, not what's evil, but what would actually cause people that would elicit praise out of someone. Paul says, would you let your mind dwell on these things? Because this is the path to joy. This is the filter that we should have for our thoughts. And here's the great news about this, is he says, you can get better at this. If you don't feel like you're good at it now, that's okay. You can get better at it. But like anything that you can get better at, what do you have to do to get better? You have to practice. He tells them that whatever they've learned or received or heard from me, including these words, you've got to put it into practice. Because when you put the work in, that when you put the time and the effort into the practice, then when you play the game starts to change. And if you're wanting the game to change, but you're not putting in the practice, it's hard to do anything different. It's hard to do anything better. It's hard to play better in the game. And so if you want your mind to change, if you want to avoid the negativity mind trap, you've got to focus your mind on the joy that Paul talks about. We've got to put in the work. See, it's the invisible practice that leads to the visible results. I'm talking about those moments when no one is there. That's when the practice happens. It's not when there's people in the stands, but it's just you and your thoughts. Those moments when no one is around, when you're having all of those imaginary conversations about what you should have said or what you could have said or what you hope you'll be able to say later on. It's in those moments that the practice matters. That's when you put in the work. And it can be easy to think those moments don't really matter, but they do. I mean, after all, it's just me and my thoughts, right? No. These moments matter. They matter greatly because these are the moments that we practice what will eventually lead or not lead us down a path. See, Paul isn't just saying, put in the practice because it'll make you better. No, it's better than that. He gives a promise. He attaches a promise to it. He says that if you put in the practice, whatever you've learned, whatever you've received or heard, whatever you've seen in me, when you put it into practice, you'll experience the God of peace who will be with you. Now, this doesn't mean that when you're thinking about something else, anything that's evil or distorted or ugly or dirty, it doesn't mean that God is not there in that moment. No, he is there. He's just not allowing you to experience his peace. And if you want to experience the peace that is promised, then you've got to put in the practice. You've got to create that filter in your mind that you run all of your thoughts through. So let me give you just 3 practical things that every one of us can do, no matter what our faith background is, whether you're a follower of Jesus or whether you're not. You can still put these 3 practical things into practice, and I think that they can help every single one of us avoid going down the negative mind trap. The first one is this: would you take your thoughts captive? In another one of Paul's letters, he says to take your thoughts captive. He says actually that we take captive every thought and we make it obedient to Christ. See, too often we treat our thoughts like a maitre d' at a restaurant. I mean, you've been somewhere before, right? It's got incredible service. You know, you walk in and they say, "Oh, we didn't realize that you would be arriving. Do you have a reservation?" You don't? That's okay. Give us a few moments. We'll make a space for you. Amazing service, right? But the reality is that some of us, we do the same thing to our thoughts. We go, oh, anger, jealousy, bitterness, rage, fear. We didn't realize you were going to be here this evening, but hey, stay right there. We're going to go and make some room for you. We treat these thoughts, we offer them excellent service like we're a maitre d'. But I think we all know that that is no way to take our thoughts captive. No, when Paul says to take our thoughts captive, I think he envisioned us acting a bit more like Liam Neeson. You know Liam Neeson, maybe even from the movie Taken. If you've seen the movie, you know the scene that I'm referring to. I mean, it's the classic scene from this movie where he leaves this voicemail on this person's phone who had taken his daughter captive. You remember it? He says, I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you're looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have any money. But what I do have is a very particular set of skills. Skills that I have acquired over a very long career. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. And if you let my daughter go now, that will be the end of it. I will not look for you. I will not pursue you. But if you do not, I will hunt you down. I will find you. And I will kill you. See, that's the kind of treatment that we should give our negative thoughts. That's the kind of treatment that we should give our negative thoughts before they take us out. We should ask our thoughts, why are you here? What's your goal in all of this? We should be vigilant with our negative thoughts that want to destroy us. We should tell them, I will hunt you down. I will take you out. Entertaining these thoughts and offering them space in our minds, it opens the door to our own captivity. We've got to be willing to be ruthless, like Liam. We've got to be willing to be ruthless as Paul instructs us. We have to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Jesus. And then the second one is this: would you find your inputs? What I mean by this is that all of our thoughts have an origin, that they all have a genesis. They come from somewhere. They come from someone. And when you start to take your thoughts captive, consider their input. The voices we listen to, they act as inputs to our thoughts. And we have to identify the inputs that move us toward the negative mind trap. Is it a person? Is it the news that you watch? Is it your social feed? I mean, let me tell you one input that causes me to go negative. It's social media. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of great things about it. Social media can be so positive and helpful and encouraging, but for most of us, it can also become an input that leads toward negative thinking. And if it causes you to compare what you don't have, what you aren't experiencing, the event that you weren't invited to, and you find yourself harboring jealousy or anger or fill in the blank with any other emotion, maybe you need to adjust that input in your life. I'm not saying go crazy and delete the apps. I'm just saying maybe you should adjust the input. Maybe for you it's your news sources. But maybe it's what you're reading. Maybe it's the friends that you're choosing to spend time with. Where do you need to dial down some of the inputs? And if your input is someone you work with or someone you live with, you may not be able to avoid them entirely, but you can consider the power you're giving that person, the power you're giving their voice in your thoughts. And this sets up for the last one. Would you choose joy? This line is taken directly from Paul. Near the end of this letter that he writes to this church in Philippi, he says this in Philippians 4, verse 4. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord, always. I will say it again, rejoice." He says it twice. He tells us to rejoice. Maybe he thought we were going to miss it. He says it for emphasis. But we have to wonder, what does it mean to rejoice in the Lord? Again, if you don't consider yourself a Jesus follower, maybe a friend suggested that you watch this content, when you hear words like this, that maybe it just sounds a little too ethereal, right? Maybe it sounds like something you'd expect a Christian to say, to just deny the world around you and rejoice in the Lord. But here's the thing. Let's remember that this is a guy who was writing this letter sitting in a Roman prison. He was not denying or ignoring reality, but he was giving followers of Jesus a different way of viewing reality. I mean, let's face it. If we're viewing life only through the lens of the circumstances around us, then we'll continually be living in the negative mind trap. Paul was saying that there's another way to view life, that there's a way to choose joy despite our circumstances. It was probably a year or so ago, I saw this choice on display in a really profound way. A mentor of mine passed away. His name was Reggie Campbell. And I wasn't the only one who was mentored by him. Reggie had been a mentor to men for 20 years and had actually launched a mentoring program that had an impact on thousands of men. At his funeral, I heard person after person speak about the impact that he had had. One of them talked about some of the last few sentences that he said just before he passed away. They said that he had been muttering some words, but then all of a sudden, with clarity and with confidence, on his deathbed, Reggie looks up at his wife and a few friends, son, daughter, and says, "I'm just amazed at what God has done in me. Jesus changed my life, and I cannot wait to see him." Even though Reggie's body had succumbed to cancer, the cancer, up until the very end, it didn't take his joy. As I sat at his funeral, I just wondered, what will I be saying in that moment? I mean, I want my response to be like Reggie's. I want God's joy to be so deep in me, in my heart, and in my mind that the last thing that I would do is to smile and to rejoice, to choose joy. I just can't believe that he would save me. He changed my life. I just can't wait to see him. If you happen to know Reggie, you'd know that he didn't arrive at that point without making that choice for years and years and years to choose joy. He, like us, he had to practice it, even when he didn't always feel like it. So maybe here's what practicing joy or choosing joy could look like for you. I know this is the way it's been for me. I actually have to go outside and look up at the sky. And I've done this at night over the past couple of months, just to take a walk, to take a break, just to look up and say, God, you're amazing. You're good. You're kind. You're faithful. You are a hiding place for anyone who needs you. You're a refuge. I can't believe you saved me. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I call it a joy walk. And maybe my neighbor who looked at me the other day and saw me doing this thought I was crazy, but I'm telling you, there's something powerful about choosing to rejoice in the Lord. And if you want to escape the trap of negativity, you can try to read every book on positivity you can find, but I think the best thing that we can do is to do what Paul told us to do, to rejoice, to find joy, to choose joy. And I think what he's saying is don't get caught up in the trap of negativity, whether your circumstances are really bad or not. It's only going to hurt you. In order to get through it, in order to have peace on the other side, you have to take those thoughts captive. You have to choose to change your perspective. You have to choose to think about what is true and noble and pure, because this repels the negative thoughts from taking root. One final verse, though, I want to give you as we wrap this up. It's found in the book of Hebrews. The author says, "Let us throw off everything that hinders us and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him, dwell on him, think about him, who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." Here's what I love about these verses, that we're told to throw off all that hinders us, throw off the negative thinking, and to fix our eyes on Jesus, who for the joy, there's that word, for the joy set before him, he did something incredibly hard. He endured the cross. And so we're told to consider him so that we don't grow weary, so that we don't lose heart. Jesus, he suffered. He was crucified on a cross. But it's almost like in the background of the cross was the word joy. And do you know what the joy set before him was? It was his love for you. It was his love for me. It was his love for the Apostle Paul. It was his love for my mentor, Reggie. We were his joy. And he made the way for us to choose joy no matter what our surroundings may be. He gave us a picture of what choosing joy really looks like. He provides the way for us not to be held captive by our thoughts, but instead to take our thoughts captive. And my prayer for you is that you would fix your eyes on him to experience the life that he makes possible. We've created some questions to help you reflect on any of these mindset adjustments that you may need to make as you move forward. I know it can be so easy to fall into a pattern of negative thinking without even realizing it. And this mind map exercise will provide a way to consider where you are and to help you create a new mindset going forward. Our hope is that this resource will be helpful and that it'll lead you to even greater freedom.